The gunshot that woke Rose Lawson at dawn was not unusual for a Friday morning in Manassa, Colorado, but the sound of her husband Thomas retching into the wash basin afterward told her everything she needed to know about where he had spent the night. She lay still in their bed, watching dust motes dance in the weak April sunlight, filtering through the curtains she had sewn herself 3 years ago when they first moved into this house, and she felt something cold settle into her stomach. Thomas stumbled into the bedroom with eyes red-rimmed and hollow, his clothes reeking of whiskey and cigar smoke, and when he finally met her gaze, she saw fear there that made her sit upright. "Thomas, what did you do?" He sank onto the edge of the bed, head in his hands. "Rose, I am so sorry. I thought I could win it back. I was so sure." She felt her heart begin to pound against her ribs. "Win what back? Thomas, answer me." "The house." His voice broke on the words. "I lost the house last night at McGinty's. Everything. The deed, the land, all of it." Rose could not breathe. The room seemed to tilt and spin around her. This house was everything they had worked for since coming to Manassa 5 years ago. She had scrubbed floors and taken in laundry and sewing to help save for the down payment. She had painted every wall, planted the small garden out back, made curtains for every window. This was supposed to be their future, the place where they would raise children and grow old together. "Tell me you are joking. Please, Thomas, tell me this is some sick joke." "I wish I was. Rose, I swear I will make this right. I will talk to whoever won it. I will work something out." "Who won it?" Her voice sounded strange in her own ears, flat and distant. "Some cowboy passing through. I had never seen him before last night. Gideon something. Gideon Kane, I think McGinty called him." Rose stood up on legs that felt like water. She was 24 years old, and in the span of a single night, everything she had built had crumbled to dust. She walked to the window and stared out at the street below, at the ordinary morning in Manassa, unfolding as if the world had not just ended. The San Luis Valley stretched out beyond the town, vast and unforgiving, with the Sangre de Cristo Mountains rising in the distance like ancient gods carved from stone. "Get out," she said quietly. "Rose, please!" "I said get out!" She turned to face him, and whatever he saw in her expression made him flinch. "You have destroyed us, Thomas. You have destroyed everything I worked for, everything I believed in. I need you to leave this house right now before I do something we will both regret." He stood slowly, swaying slightly. "Where should I go? I do not care. Go to McGinty's. Go to hell. Just go." After he left, Rose allowed herself exactly 5 minutes to sit on the floor and cry. Then she washed her face, braided her auburn hair, put on her best dress, the blue calico one she wore to church, and went looking for Gideon Kane. Manassa was not a large town. Established only 17 years earlier, in 1879, by Mormon settlers, it sat in the high desert valley at over 7,000 feet elevation, where the air was thin and dry, and the winters could kill a man who was not prepared. The main street consisted of perhaps 20 buildings, most of them wood frame construction, and everyone knew everyone else's business. Finding a stranger would not be difficult. Rose walked past the general store, past the church where she and Thomas had been married 4 years ago, past the schoolhouse where she had once dreamed of sending their children. The morning was warming up, but there was still a chill in the air, as there often was in April at this elevation. She kept her head high and her shoulders back, even though she could feel eyes watching her from windows, even though she knew that by noon the whole town would know that Thomas Lawson had gambled away his house. McGinty's saloon looked shabby in the daylight, all its romance and mystery stripped away to reveal peeling paint and warped boards. Rose had never been inside before. Respectable women did not frequent saloons, but nothing about her life felt respectable anymore, so she pushed through the swinging doors and stepped into the dim interior. The smell hit her first: stale beer, old tobacco, unwashed bodies, and something else she could not quite identify. The bartender, A heavy-set man with a handlebar mustache looked up from wiping glasses, and his eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline. "Madam, I do not think you want to be in here. I am looking for Gideon Kane. He is upstairs, room 3. But madam, you really should not." Rose was already climbing the narrow staircase at the back of the saloon. Her heart hammered, but her steps were steady. She found room 3 and knocked hard enough to make her knuckles ache. "It is open," came a voice from inside, rough with sleep. She turned the handle and stepped into the small room. A man sat on the edge of the bed, pulling on his boots. He looked up at her entrance and froze. Rose found herself staring at a man in his late 20s, with dark hair that fell past his collar, eyes the color of weathered leather, and a face that might have been handsome if not for the scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw. He wore a simple shirt and trousers, and she could see his gun belt hanging on the bedpost. "Madam," he said, standing quickly, "this is not proper. Nothing about this situation is proper. Are you Gideon Kane?" He studied her for a long moment, and she had the unnerving sensation that he was seeing straight through to her bones. "I am, and you must be Mrs. Lawson. You know who I am. Your husband talked about you quite a bit last night. Showed everyone a tintype photograph he carries. Said you were the best thing that ever happened to him." Gideon's voice was measured, careful, right before he bet his house on a pair of 4s. The casual cruelty of those words, even delivered without malice, made Rose's chest tight. "I came here to ask what you intend to do with my home." "Your home?" He said it thoughtfully, not as a question. He moved to the washstand and poured water into the basin, splashed it on his face. When he straightened, water dripping from his jaw, he said, "I rode into Manassa yesterday afternoon planning to stay one night and move on. I do not need a house here, Mrs. Lawson." Hope flickered in her chest, fragile and painful. "Then you will sell it back to us?" "I can work. I can pay you over time. I am a good seamstress. I am not going to sell it back to you." The hope died as quickly as it had sparked to life. Rose felt her eyes burn but refused to let tears fall. "Then what? You will turn me out? I have nowhere else to go." Gideon dried his face with a towel that had seen better days. "I rode by the house this morning before sunrise. It is a good house, small but well maintained. Someone clearly cares about it." He walked to the room's single chair where his jacket hung and pulled something from the inner pocket. "Your husband does not deserve it, and he sure as hell does not deserve you." He held out a folded paper. Rose took it with shaking hands and opened it. It was the deed to her house. Her eyes scanned the document, not understanding at first what she was seeing. Then her gaze caught on the name written in fresh ink at the bottom. "Rose Lawson." "I do not understand." "It is pretty simple. The house is yours now, legally, properly, solely in your name. I signed it over this morning at the land office. They open early on Fridays." Rose stared at him, at this stranger who had just given her back everything she thought she had lost. "Why would you do this?" Gideon shrugged and reached for his gun belt, buckling it around his hips with practiced ease. "I have known men like your husband. Good men mostly, but weak. The kind who make promises they cannot keep and mistakes that hurt everyone but themselves. I have been through enough towns, seen enough women left with nothing because some fool thought he could beat the odds." He settled his hat on his head. "Consider it a gift, Mrs. Lawson. Or justice, whichever helps you sleep at night." "I cannot just accept this. This is too much. You can and you will." His voice was firm but not unkind. "That house should have always been in your name anyway, considering who actually made it a home. Now it is, and your husband cannot gamble it away ever again." Rose looked down at the deed in her hands, at her name written there in black ink, and something inside her that had been clenched tight for years began to loosen. "I do not know what to say. Say goodbye. I am riding out within the hour." "Wait!" The word came out before she could stop it. Gideon paused at the door, looking back at her with those unreadable eyes. Rose swallowed hard. At least let me make you breakfast. It is the least I can do. That is not necessary. Please, I need to do something. I cannot just accept this without even thanking you properly. He studied her for a long moment, and she saw something shift in his expression, something that might have been loneliness, or might have been curiosity. All right, Mrs. Lawson. Breakfast would be welcome. They walked through town together, and Rose could feel the stairs following them like physical touches. Let them talk, she thought. Let them say whatever they wanted. She had her house back, and it was in her name, and nothing anyone said could take that away. When they reached the small white house with blue shutters, her house, she felt a surge of emotion so powerful it nearly brought her to her knees. Thomas was not there. Rose was grateful for that small mercy. She lit the stove and began pulling out ingredients while Gideon stood awkwardly in the doorway of the kitchen, clearly uncertain whether he should sit or leave or do something else entirely. You can sit down, Rose said, gesturing to the table. I promise I do not bite. A ghost of a smile crossed his face as he sat. I have faced down rustlers and outlaws, but a proper lady in her own kitchen is somehow more intimidating. Rose cracked eggs into a pan, added salt and pepper from the small tin containers on the shelf. I stopped feeling like a proper lady sometime around dawn this morning when my husband told me he had destroyed our lives. Now I just feel like someone trying to figure out what comes next. What does come next? She had been asking herself the same question since the moment she saw her name on that deed. I honestly do not know. I suppose I will divorce Thomas, though I am not sure I can afford a lawyer. I will keep working, keep taking in sewing. I have a little money saved that he did not know about. It is not much, but it is something. You could remarry. A woman like you would not lack for suitors. Rose flipped the eggs with perhaps more force than necessary. A woman like me? You mean a woman whose husband humiliated her in front of the entire town? I am sure men will be lining up. She regretted the bitterness in her voice immediately. I am sorry. You have been nothing but kind to me, and here I am snapping at you. You have every right to be angry. She plated the eggs along with some bread she had baked yesterday, back when her life still made sense, and set the food in front of him. As she poured coffee, she said, Tell me about yourself. Where are you from? Where are you going? Gideon ate with the methodical efficiency of a man who had gone hungry often enough not to take food for granted. I grew up in Texas, outside of Amarillo, joined a cattle drive when I was 16, worked as a cowboy for years. These days, I mostly drift, pick up work where I can, move on when I get restless. That sounds lonely. Sometimes it is peaceful. He took a sip of coffee. I have seen a lot of country. Montana, Wyoming, the Dakota Territories. Every place has its own beauty, its own story. Rose sat down across from him with her own cup of coffee, though she could not imagine eating. What brought you to Manassa? Just passing through on my way to New Mexico. Heard there might be ranch work down near Santa Fe. He finished his eggs and sat back. That was the best meal I have had in months, Mrs. Lawson. Thank you. Rose, please. Just call me Rose. Then you should call me Gideon. They sat in silence for a moment, the morning light growing stronger through the kitchen window. Rose studied him over the rim of her coffee cup, this stranger who had become her unlikely savior. There was something solid about him, something steady. He did not fidget or avoid her gaze. He simply was, present and real in a way that Thomas had never quite managed to be. Do you really have to leave today? The question surprised her as much as it seemed to surprise him. I was planning on it. Why? I just thought. She hesitated, unsure how to put her thoughts into words. You gave me back my home. The least I could do is offer you a place to stay for a few days. The spare room is small but clean, and if you are looking for work, there are ranches around here that always need good hands, especially coming into spring. Gideon shook his head slowly. I appreciate the offer, But I do not think that would be appropriate. You are still a married woman, and I have already caused enough gossip by walking through town with you. I stopped caring about gossip the moment Thomas gambled away our house. And as for being married, she laughed, but there was no humor in it. I think my marriage ended last night. The rest is just paperwork. She leaned forward, surprised by her own boldness. Stay, please, at least for a few days. I could use a friend right now, and you look like you could use a proper rest. He considered this, his weathered hands wrapped around the coffee cup. Rose found herself holding her breath, waiting for his answer, though she could not have said why it mattered so much. Finally, he nodded slowly. 3 days. I will stay 3 days, and I will help you with whatever needs fixing around the house. Consider it payment for your hospitality. Relief washed over her, warm and unexpected. 3 days, that sounds perfect. Thomas returned that afternoon while Gideon was repairing a loose board on the front porch. Rose heard raised voices and came out to find her husband standing at the gate, swaying slightly, his face flushed with anger or alcohol or both. What the hell is he doing here? Thomas demanded, pointing an unsteady finger at Gideon. He is a guest in my house, Rose said, emphasizing the word my just enough to make Thomas flinch. Your house? Rose, we need to talk about this. I know I made a mistake, but… A mistake? Her voice was quiet, but it cut through his words like a knife. A mistake is forgetting to buy flour at the store. A mistake is burning the bread. Gambling away our home is not a mistake, Thomas. It is a betrayal. I was going to win it back. I had a system. Gideon straightened from his work, and though he did not say anything, his presence shifted somehow. He became taller, more solid, and unmistakably dangerous. Thomas seemed to notice this change and took a step back. You need to leave, Rose said to her husband. I do not want you here. This is my house too. Actually, it is not. She pulled the deed from her apron pocket and held it up. Mr. Kane was kind enough to sign it over to me. My name, Thomas. Only my name. You have no legal right to be here. Thomas stared at the paper, then at Gideon, then back at Rose. She watched emotions play across his face. Shock, anger, disbelief, and finally something that might have been shame. You cannot do this, Rose. We are married. A situation I intend to rectify as soon as possible. Now please leave before I ask Mr. Kane to help you leave. I have nowhere to go. Then I suggest you go to McGinty's. You seem to be quite comfortable there. Rose turned her back on him and walked into the house, surprised to find that her hands were not even shaking. Through the window, she watched Thomas stand at the gate for a long moment before finally turning and stumbling away down the street. Gideon came in a few minutes later, brushing sawdust from his hands. That was well handled. I did not feel well handled. I felt like I was falling apart inside. The trick is not letting them see that. He washed his hands in the kitchen basin. He will come back, you know. Men like him always do. They think if they just apologize enough, if they cry and make promises, everything will go back to the way it was. Will it be a problem for you? If he comes back? Only if he makes it one. Gideon dried his hands and met her eyes. I am not a violent man by nature, Rose, but I do not tolerate bullies. And right now, your husband is trying to bully you into forgiveness you do not owe him. Rose nodded slowly. Thank you for fixing the porch, for staying, for all of it. It is just a few boards. You know, I am not talking about the boards. That evening, Rose made dinner while Gideon worked on repairing a section of fence in the backyard. She found herself watching him through the window as she peeled potatoes, admiring the economical grace of his movements, the quiet competence with which he approached every task. There was something deeply attractive about a man who knew how to work with his hands, who did not shy away from honest labor. The thought startled her. She should not be thinking of any man as attractive, certainly not so soon after her marriage had imploded. But she could not seem to help herself. Gideon was everything Thomas was not. reliable, honest, strong in ways that had nothing to do with physical strength. He had saved her home and asked nothing in return. What woman would not be drawn to that? They ate dinner together at the small kitchen table, talking about inconsequential things: the weather, the town, the best route to Santa Fe. Rose told him about growing up in Kansas, about coming west with Thomas, full of dreams and hope. Gideon told her about working cattle drives, about nights under stars so vast they seemed to press down on you, about the strange beauty of the desert in bloom. "Do you ever want to settle down?" Rose asked. "Have a place of your own? A family?" Gideon was quiet for a moment, turning his coffee cup slowly in his hands. "I used to. When I was younger, I thought I would find a good woman, buy some land, raise horses. But that was a long time ago." "What changed?" "Life, I suppose. The longer you drift, the harder it becomes to imagine stopping. You get used to the movement, the freedom. The idea of staying in one place starts to feel like a trap." "That sounds sad." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she felt something pass between them, some current of understanding or recognition. "Maybe it is, or maybe I just have not found the right reason to stop yet." Rose felt her cheeks warm and looked down at her plate. "More coffee? Please." On the second day, Thomas showed up drunk at midnight, pounding on the door and shouting Rose's name. She woke to the sound, heart racing, and grabbed her robe. But Gideon was already downstairs when she emerged from her bedroom. He stood at the door in his trousers and undershirt, boots unlaced, looking wide awake despite the hour. "Stay upstairs," he said quietly when he saw her. "I will handle this. He is my husband, my problem. He is drunk and angry, which makes him dangerous. Please, Rose, let me deal with this." She wanted to argue, but something in his expression stopped her. She nodded and stayed at the top of the stairs, close enough to hear, but out of sight. Gideon opened the door. Thomas nearly fell through it. "Where is she? I need to talk to her." "Your wife is asleep, and you are going to leave her that way." "She is my wife. I have a right." "You have no rights here. She made that clear yesterday. Now you are going to turn around and walk away, or I am going to make you walk away. You cannot threaten me. This is my town. It is also the town where everyone saw you gamble away your house and lose your wife through your own stupidity. You really want to add another public humiliation to that list?" Gideon's voice was calm but hard as iron. "Go home, Thomas. Sleep it off. Tomorrow, start figuring out how to be a better man. But tonight, you are going to leave this woman in peace." There was a long, tense silence. Rose held her breath, waiting. Finally, she heard Thomas's retreating footsteps and the sound of the door closing. Gideon locked it and stood there for a moment, his hand still on the wood. Rose came downstairs slowly. "Thank you." He turned, and in the dim light from the single lamp, his scarred face looked carved from stone. "You do not have to thank me every time I do something decent." "Maybe I want to." She pulled her robe tighter around herself, suddenly aware of how intimate this felt, the two of them alone in the dark house. "Were you really going to fight him?" "If I had to, though I would have preferred not to. Fighting a drunk is like fighting the wind, pointless and exhausting." A laugh surprised her, escaping before she could stop it. "That is an accurate description of Thomas in general." Gideon smiled, a real smile this time, and she saw how it transformed his face. "You should go back to bed, get some rest. Will you be all right down here? I spent 10 years sleeping on the ground with nothing but a saddle for a pillow. Your spare bed is luxury. I will be fine." Rose climbed the stairs, but paused at the top, looking back at him. He had moved to the window and stood looking out at the dark street, a silent guardian. "Gideon, why are you really doing all this?" "The truth." He did not turn around, but she saw his shoulders rise and fall with a deep breath. "Because someone should have done it for my mother. My father was a gambling man too, among other vices. She lost everything before she died, and not one person in our town lifted a finger to help her. I swore if I ever had the chance to be different, to do better, I would take it. That is the truth. Rose felt tears prick her eyes. I am sorry about your mother. Me too. Now get some sleep, Rose. The third day dawned clear and warm with the promise of real spring in the air. Rose woke early and made breakfast, trying not to think about the fact that this was Gideon's last day. He would leave tomorrow, ride south to Santa Fe or wherever else the wind took him, and she would go back to her life alone in this house that now belonged only to her. The thought should have been liberating, but instead, it felt lonely. They spent the morning working in the garden, Gideon turning the soil while Rose planted seeds, tomatoes, beans, squash, all the vegetables that would feed her through the summer and fall. They worked in comfortable silence, broken occasionally by small observations about the weather or the quality of the soil. You are good at this, Rose said, watching him work. The gardening, I mean. Most cowboys I have met would not know a seed from a stone. My mother kept a garden. She taught me before she died. Said a man who could grow his own food would never go hungry. He paused, leaning on the shovel. She was wrong about that, but I still remember the lessons. Rose sat back on her heels, pushing hair out of her face with a dirt-smudged hand. Will you tell me about her? Your mother? So he did. He told her about a woman named Margaret Kane who sang hymns while she cooked and could make a feast from almost nothing, who read her son stories every night even when she was too tired to stand, who loved a man who did not deserve her love and paid for that devotion with her life and happiness. She sounds like she was wonderful, Rose said softly when he finished. She was. She deserved better than she got. Gideon stabbed the shovel into the earth. They all do. Good women married to weak men. It is a story as old as time, and it never stops making me angry. Is that why you never married? Because you are afraid of becoming your father? The question hung in the air between them. Gideon wiped sweat from his forehead, leaving a streak of dirt. Maybe, or maybe I just never met a woman worth staying for. The way he looked at her when he said it made Rose's breath catch. She turned away, focusing intently on the seed packet in her hands. You should wash up. I will make lunch. They ate on the porch, sandwiches and cold lemonade, watching Manassa go about its afternoon business. Rose saw neighbors glancing their way, saw curtains twitch in windows up and down the street. Let them look, let them wonder. Soon enough, Gideon would be gone, and she would be just another divorced woman trying to make her way in a world that had little sympathy for such creatures. What are you thinking about? Gideon asked. The future. How strange it is that 3 days ago I thought I knew exactly what my life would look like, and now everything has changed. Is that a bad thing? I do not know yet. Ask me in a year. He was quiet for a moment, then said, I have been thinking about Santa Fe and the work there. And I am wondering if it would not still be there in a few weeks, or a few months. He set down his glass and turned to face her fully. I am wondering if maybe I have found a reason to stop drifting, at least for a while. Rose's heart began to beat faster. What reason is that? You know what reason? His voice was low, serious. I have been trying not to think about it. Trying to tell myself it is just because you're beautiful and sad, and I feel protective of you. But it is more than that, Rose. These 3 days with you have been the most content I have felt in years. This house, this town, it all feels like something I did not know I was looking for. Gideon, I am still married. I am a mess. My life is falling apart. Your life is coming back together. You are stronger than you think, braver than you know. And yes, you are still legally married, which is why I am not asking for anything improper. I am just asking for permission to stay, to work at one of those ranches you mentioned, to rent a room in town, to see where this might go between us once you are free. Rose stared at him, at this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had not known she was praying. You would do that? Give up your freedom, your plans, just to stay here with me? I have been free for a long time, Rose. Maybe too long. And plans change. That is life. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was calloused and warm against hers. I am not saying I love you. It is too soon for that, and we both know it. But I am saying I want the chance to love you. I am saying I see something in you that makes me want to be the kind of man who stays instead of running, if you will have me. Rose felt tears spill down her cheeks. 3 days ago, I thought my life was over. Now you are offering me a future I never imagined possible. Is that a yes? That is a yes. Yes, please stay. Yes, I want to see where this goes. Yes to all of it. Gideon smiled, that rare, transformative smile, and lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles with a gentleness that made her chest ache. Then I will stay, for as long as you want me here. The rest of that day passed in a blur of planning and talking. Gideon would take a room at the boarding house run by Mrs. Patterson on the east side of town. He would seek work at the Macklin Ranch, which Rose knew was always looking for experienced hands. They would see each other as often as propriety allowed, while Rose worked on obtaining a divorce from Thomas. That evening, as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, they sat together on the porch steps, not touching, carefully maintaining the space that propriety demanded, but close enough that Rose could feel the warmth of him beside her. My friends back in Kansas would never believe this, she said. A cowboy riding into town, winning my house and giving it back to me. It sounds like something from a dime novel. Life is stranger than fiction sometimes. Gideon stretched his legs out in front of him. Though I am not sure I am heroic enough to be in a dime novel. Those cowboys are always shooting outlaws and rescuing women from speeding trains. You rescued me from something worse than a speeding train. You rescued me from hopelessness. That seems pretty heroic to me. He turned to look at her, and in the fading light, his eyes were soft. You would have been fine, Rose. You are the kind of woman who lands on her feet no matter how hard the fall. I just happened to be there to help soften the landing a bit. Maybe, but I am glad you were there. She stood, brushing off her skirts. I should make dinner. Will you eat with me one last time before you move to Mrs. Patterson's? I would like that very much. They ate slowly, stretching the meal out, neither wanting the evening to end. When the dishes were washed and put away, when there was nothing left to do but say good night, they stood awkwardly in the front hallway like nervous children. I will come by tomorrow morning to move my things, Gideon said. And then I will go talk to Macklin about that job. Thank you for everything. Rose wanted to touch him, to hug him or take his hand or do something to mark this moment, but she held herself back. There would be time for that later, once her marriage was legally ended and her life was her own again. As if reading her thoughts, Gideon said, We will do this right, Rose. No rushing, no impropriety. I will court you the way you deserve to be courted, and when the time is right, when you are ready, we will move forward. But we have time, all the time in the world. I like the sound of that. He put on his hat, settled it at the proper angle, and opened the door. Then he paused and looked back at her. Rose, I am glad I came to Manassa. I am glad I won that card game. I am glad I met you. Just wanted you to know that. I am glad too. Good night, Gideon. Good night, Rose. The next several weeks passed in a strange new rhythm. Gideon got the job at the Macklin Ranch, working long days, breaking horses and mending fences and doing all the hard labor that came with spring on a cattle ranch. He would come into town on Sunday afternoons, cleaned up and proper, and they would walk together or sit on the porch talking while the whole town watched. Rose began divorce proceedings, meeting with a lawyer named Samuel Hartwell, who had an office above the general store. The process was complicated and expensive, but Rose was determined. She sold some of her mother's jewelry, pieces she had been saving for children she would now never have with Thomas, and used the money to pay Mr. Hartwell's fees. Thomas fought it at first. He showed up at the lawyer's office, drunk and belligerent, shouting about his rights as a husband. But when Mr. Hartwell pointed out that Thomas had no legal claim to Rose's house and no financial means to support a wife, and that Rose had several witnesses prepared to testify about his gambling and drinking, Thomas's resistance crumbled. He signed the papers with a shaking hand and left town 2 days later. Rose heard through the gossip mill that he had gone to Denver. She hoped he found whatever he was looking for there. She hoped he became a better man, but mostly she just felt relieved that he was gone. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday in late May. Rose wore her best dress to the courthouse, and when the judge declared her marriage officially dissolved, she felt something inside her unclench. She walked out of that courthouse a free woman, and Gideon was waiting for her on the steps. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Lighter, like I have been carrying a weight I did not realize was there, and now it is gone." She smiled at him. "Free. Good. Then you will not mind if I ask you something. What is that?" He offered her his arm. "Mrs. Lawson. Miss Lawson, would you do me the honor of allowing me to court you properly? With flowers and buggy rides and all the traditional nonsense?" Rose laughed, taking his arm. "I would love that, Mr. Kane. Though I should warn you, I expect very traditional nonsense. I am a respectable divorced woman, after all. The most respectable divorced woman in Manassa, I am sure." They walked through town together in the warm May sunshine, and Rose did not care who saw them or what anyone thought. She had her house, her freedom, and a man who wanted to court her properly. Life, she thought, had a funny way of working out sometimes. The courtship that followed was sweet and old-fashioned, and everything Rose had dreamed of as a young girl. Gideon brought her wildflowers from the hills, bouquets of blue columbine and Indian paintbrush that she arranged in jars on her kitchen table. He took her on picnics by the Rio Grande, spreading blankets on the riverbank while they ate sandwiches and talked about everything and nothing. He taught her to ride better, taking her out on gentle horses from the Macklin Ranch and showing her the vast beauty of the San Luis Valley. "It is like the ocean," Rose said one afternoon, gazing out at the endless expanse of sage and grass. "I have never seen the ocean, but I imagine it must feel like this. So much space, so much sky." "It is humbling," Gideon agreed. He sat beside her on his horse, their legs nearly touching. "Makes you realize how small you are, how brief a human life is in the scope of all this, but also how precious. If you only get a little time, you want to spend it well." "And how do you want to spend yours?" He looked at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "I think you know the answer to that." They kissed for the first time on a June evening, standing on her porch under a sky filled with stars. It was a soft kiss, tentative and sweet, his lips gentle against hers. When they pulled apart, Rose was smiling. "I have been wanting to do that for weeks," Gideon admitted. "So have I." "Good. Then you will not mind if I do it again." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Rose felt something shift inside her. This was what love was supposed to feel like. Not the desperate, anxious love she had felt for Thomas, always wondering if he would disappoint her, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. This was steady and real and solid as bedrock. This was the kind of love that could last. Summer passed in a haze of happiness. Gideon spent his days at the ranch and his evenings with Rose. They became a fixture in Manassa, the cowboy and the divorced woman, and eventually even the gossip died down. People got used to seeing them together. Mrs. Patterson, who ran the boarding house, told anyone who would listen that Gideon Kane was the finest young man she had ever rented a room to, always paying on time and never causing trouble. The Macklins praised his work ethic and skill with horses. Even Reverend Thompson, who had initially disapproved of Rose's divorce, came around after seeing how happy she was, how Gideon treated her with unfailing respect and gentleness. By the time autumn arrived, painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, Rose knew with absolute certainty that she wanted to spend the rest of her life with this man. She was sitting in her kitchen snapping beans for dinner when the realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. She loved Gideon Kane, not the tentative, hopeful love of courtship, but the deep, abiding love of someone who had seen her at her worst and chosen to stay. Someone who made her laugh and challenged her thinking and kissed her like she was precious. Someone who had saved her home and then saved her heart. That evening, when Gideon came for dinner, she told him. They were sitting on the porch watching the sun set, as they did most evenings, and Rose simply turned to him and said, "I love you." He went very still. Then a smile spread across his face, slow and wondering. "Say that again. I love you, Gideon Kane. I love you, and I want you to know it. I do not expect you to say it back if you are not ready, but I needed you to know." "Not ready." He laughed and pulled her close, his arm around her shoulders. "Rose, I have been in love with you since the day I gave you that deed, and you looked at me like I had hung the moon. I just did not want to say it too soon, did not want to scare you or make you feel pressured. But I love you. I love you so much it terrifies me sometimes." Rose turned in his embrace and kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Gideon rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "I know we have only been courting a few months, but I do not want to wait anymore. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to build a life with you in that house that is yours. I want children with you and growing old with you and everything in between. Marry me, Rose." "Yes." The word came out on a sob, joyful and overwhelming. Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes. They were married in October, on a crisp autumn day, when the air smelled of wood smoke and fallen leaves. The ceremony took place in the same church where Rose had married Thomas, but this time felt completely different. This time Rose walked down the aisle with her head high and her heart full, moving toward a future that shone bright with promise. Gideon wore a new suit for the occasion, his dark hair freshly cut, and when Rose reached the altar and saw the look on his face, she knew she had made the right choice. This was love. This was partnership. This was everything marriage was supposed to be. Reverend Thompson performed the ceremony with approval he had not shown at Rose's first wedding. The whole town came to witness it, even Mrs. Patterson, who cried happy tears into her handkerchief. When Gideon kissed Rose as husband and wife, the church erupted in applause. The reception was held at the Macklin Ranch, with tables set up in the barn and a fiddle player providing music. They danced their first dance as husband and wife to cheers and laughter, Gideon holding Rose close as they spun across the hay-strewn floor. "How does it feel to be Mrs. Kane?" he murmured in her ear. "Like coming home," Rose said. "Like everything I went through, all the pain and disappointment, was worth it because it led me to you." That night, they returned to the little white house with blue shutters, the house that had started this whole impossible love story. Gideon carried Rose over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the front hallway. "Welcome home, Mrs. Kane." "It has always been home," Rose said. "But it is even better now that you are here permanently." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, two people who had waited and courted properly, finally coming together. Afterward, lying in Rose's bed, their bed now, with Gideon's arm around her and her head on his chest, Rose felt a peace so profound it brought tears to her eyes. "What is wrong?" Gideon asked, noticing. "Nothing is wrong. Everything is right. For the first time in my life, everything is exactly right." He kissed the top of her head. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure it stays that way." The years that followed were not without their challenges. The first winter was hard, with snow piling up to the windows and temperatures dropping so low that water froze in the pipes. Gideon worked long hours at the ranch, coming home exhausted and cold, and Rose learned to make their modest savings stretch to cover expenses. But they faced it all together, and that made all the difference. In the spring of 1897, Rose discovered she was pregnant. She told Gideon one morning over breakfast, simply and without fanfare, "I think we are going to have a baby." He dropped his fork. "You think? You are not sure?" "I am fairly certain. I have missed my monthly courses, and I have been feeling sick in the mornings. Unless you know of another explanation." Gideon was around the table in an instant, pulling her to her feet and spinning her around. "A baby! Rose, we are going to have a baby!" She laughed, dizzy with joy and morning sickness. "Careful, you will make me throw up." He set her down immediately, looking stricken. "Are you all right? Should you be sitting? Do you need anything?" "I need you to stop fussing. I am pregnant, not dying." But Gideon fussed anyway, and Rose found she did not mind as much as she pretended to. He brought her tea when she felt sick, rubbed her feet when they swelled, and talked to her growing belly every night before they went to sleep. "Hello in there, little one. This is your father. I cannot wait to meet you." Their son was born on a snowy December morning, arriving with a loud cry that announced his presence to the world. They named him Gabriel, after Gideon's father, despite everything, because Gideon believed in redemption and second chances. Gabriel Kane had his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes, and from the moment Gideon held him, Rose knew their family was complete. Except it was not complete. Not quite. 2 years later, their daughter arrived. A tiny, fierce thing they named Ruth after Rose's grandmother. Where Gabriel was quiet and thoughtful, Ruth was loud and adventurous, climbing everything in sight as soon as she could walk. Rose watched Gideon with their children and fell in love with him all over again. He was patient and playful, teaching Gabriel to ride and letting Ruth help him with small tasks around the house, never too busy or too tired to answer their endless questions. "You are a wonderful father," Rose told him one evening. They sat on the porch, as they still did most evenings, watching their children play in the yard. Gabriel was 5, Ruth 3, and both were covered in dirt and grinning. "I am just trying to be better than my father was," Gideon said. "That is not a high bar. You clear it by miles. Our children will never doubt that they are loved. They will never wonder if they are safe. That is everything." He took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "We have built something good here, have we not? You and me, this house, these children. It is more than I ever thought I would have. We have built something wonderful." Rose squeezed his hand. "And it all started with a card game and an act of kindness. Best hand I ever played." As the years passed, the little white house with blue shutters became a hub of life and love. Gideon eventually bought into the Macklin Ranch as a partner, using money they had saved carefully over the years. The partnership meant more stability, more income, and the freedom for Gideon to be home more often. Rose continued to take in sewing, but now it was supplemental income rather than desperate survival. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. Gabriel grew into a serious young man who loved books and learning. Gideon and Rose scraped together the money to send him to a teaching college in Denver when he was 18, and he returned to Manassa 2 years later to become the town's school teacher. Ruth, true to her adventurous nature, married a rancher and moved to Montana, giving Rose and Gideon grandchildren they doted on during their infrequent visits south. On a summer evening in 1915, Rose and Gideon sat on their porch watching the sunset. They were older now, both in their 40s, with gray threading through their hair and lines around their eyes. But the love between them was as strong as ever, tempered and strengthened by nearly 2 decades of marriage. "Do you ever think about that night?" Rose asked. "The night Thomas gambled away the house?" "Sometimes." "Why?" "Because I was thinking about how devastated I was, how I thought my life was over. And now I look at everything we have built, and I realize that it was not ending. It was beginning." She turned to him, taking his hand. "If Thomas had not done what he did, If you had not won that card game, we never would have met. I would have stayed in a mediocre marriage, probably, getting more unhappy every year. Instead, I got this. I got you and our children and this beautiful life. So, in a strange way, I am grateful to Thomas for his weakness. It led me to your strength. Gideon raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles the way he had done all those years ago. You would have found your way to a good life eventually, with or without me. You are too strong not to. But I am grateful that I got to be part of it. These years with you have been the best of my life. Rose! Every single day with you is a gift. Even the hard days, especially the hard days, because we face them together. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to orange to deep purple. Somewhere in the house behind them, Rose could hear Gabriel marking papers, the scratch of his pen a familiar and comforting sound. Ruth's most recent letter sat on the kitchen table, full of news about her children and the ranch and how much she missed them. We did good, Gideon said finally. You and me. We took something broken and made it beautiful. We did. Rose leaned her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him. Leather and hay and home. And we are not done yet. We have years ahead of us still. Years to watch our children grow and our grandchildren arrive and our life continue to unfold. Years together, that is all I need. As the stars began to appear in the vast Colorado sky, Rose thought about the girl she had been 19 years ago, devastated and lost, sure her life was over. She wished she could go back and tell that girl not to worry. Tell her that sometimes the worst moments lead to the best lives. Tell her that a cowboy would ride into town and change everything, and it would be wonderful and terrifying and worth every moment, but she could not go back, and that was all right. She could only be here, now, on this porch with this man, grateful for every twist of fate that had brought them together. I love you, she said, as she did every evening. I love you too, Gideon replied, as he had done every evening for 19 years and would continue to do for all the years to come. And in the little white house with blue shutters, in the high desert town of Manassa, Colorado, their love story continued, written not in grand gestures, but in small daily acts of devotion and care. It was the love story that began with a card game and a deed signed over by a drifting cowboy. It was the love story that proved sometimes the worst nights lead to the best mornings. It was their love story, and it was perfect. Autumn arrived again, as it did every year, painting the valley in fire colors. Rose stood in her garden, now much larger than that first small plot she and Gideon had planted together, harvesting the last of the tomatoes before the frost came. At 46, her hands were weathered from years of work, but they were sure and steady as she plucked the ripe fruit from the vines. Need some help? Gideon appeared at the garden gate, smiling at her in the way that still made her heart skip. I would never turn down your help. She handed him a basket. Though should you not be at the ranch? The Macklin boy is handling things today. I wanted to spend the afternoon with my wife. He set down the basket and pulled her close, dirt and tomatoes and all. Is that allowed? It is required. Rose kissed him, tasting coffee and the cinnamon biscuit he must have stolen from the kitchen earlier. We should check the fence on the north side before winter. I noticed it was sagging last week. Always thinking ahead, that is one of the things I love about you. One of them? What are the others? Well, I love your mind, sharp as any blade. I love your hands and what they create. I love your strength, how you never gave up even when you had every reason to. I love your laugh, your stubbornness, the way you look at me like I am the best thing in your world. Should I continue? Rose felt her eyes mist over. After all these years, you can still make me cry. After all these years, you can still make me grateful I stopped drifting. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Come on, let us finish this harvest, and then I will help you make that green tomato relish you are so famous for. They worked together in the warm autumn sun, talking about nothing and everything. Gabriel was thinking of proposing to a young woman named Sarah, who had recently moved to town. Ruth had written that she was pregnant again, which would make grandchild number 5. The ranch was doing well, and they were considering buying another parcel of land to expand the operation. Can you believe it has been almost 20 years? Rose said, as they carried the full baskets into the kitchen. 20 years since that morning I walked into McGinty's looking for you. Best decision you ever made. Second best. The best decision was saying yes when you asked to court me. Gideon set down his basket and pulled her into his arms again. I am going to kiss you now, Mrs. Kane, and we are going to forget about the tomatoes for a little while. Mr. Kane, you are incorrigible. You love it. I really do. Winter came, as it always did in the high country, with fierce winds and heavy snow. Rose and Gideon spent the cold months close to the fire, reading together, playing cards, making plans for the spring. Gabriel came for dinner every Sunday, bringing Sarah with him more often than not. They announced their engagement in January, and Rose cried happy tears while Gideon shook Gabriel's hand with fatherly pride. You raised a good man, Sarah told Rose one afternoon when they were alone in the kitchen preparing dinner. He is kind and smart and patient. Those are rare qualities. His father taught him well. Gideon has always been the best man I know. Gabriel says his father saved your life once, that he won your house in a card game and gave it back to you. Rose smiled, rolling out pie dough. It is true, though I would say he saved more than my life. He saved my future. He gave me the chance to become the person I was meant to be. That is beautiful. It is also true, sometimes the best love stories start in the strangest ways. Gabriel and Sarah married in the spring, a joyful ceremony that reminded Rose so much of her own wedding to Gideon that she spent half the day crying. Gideon kept a steady arm around her waist, handing her his handkerchief when she needed it, understanding without words why this day meant so much to her. He is happy, Gideon said, as they watched their son and his new wife dance. We did well, Rose. We did. He has a good life ahead of him, a good woman by his side. What more could any parent want? That night, alone in their bedroom, Gideon held Rose close. Have I told you lately how grateful I am? You tell me every day, but I never get tired of hearing it. I am grateful for you, for our life, for everything we have built together. When I rode into Manassa that day in April 1896, I had no idea my whole life was about to change. I thought I would stay one night and move on. Instead, I found home. Rose traced the old scar on his face, that familiar line she had kissed 1,000 times. You gave me back my home. It seems only fair that you found yours here too. Poetic justice? Something like that. Summer arrived with its heat and long days. Ruth came to visit with her entire family, filling the house with noise and laughter and chaos. Rose watched Gideon with their grandchildren, teaching them to ride just as he had taught Gabriel and Ruth, and fell in love with him all over again. This man, who had started as a stranger in a saloon, had become the center of her entire world. One evening, after everyone had gone to bed, Rose and Gideon snuck out to the porch like teenagers. They sat on the steps, looking up at the stars that burned bright in the high desert sky. Do you remember when we used to do this when we were courting? Rose asked, sitting so properly apart because it was not proper to be closer. I remember. I also remember how much I wanted to kiss you and how long I made myself wait. You were very proper. It was one of the things that made me trust you. Gideon put his arm around her, pulling her close. At 50, with silver threading through her auburn hair, she was even more beautiful to him than she had been at 24. I have loved you for more than half my life now. That does not seem possible, but it is true. I have loved you for more than half my life, too. The better half by far. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of Manassa, a dog barking in the distance, The whisper of wind through the cottonwoods, the faint sound of music from the saloon. McGinty's was under new ownership now, run by a widow named Ellen, who did not allow gambling or fighting. Times changed, people changed, but some things remained constant. Promise me something, Rose said suddenly. Anything. Promise me that no matter what happens, no matter how old we get or what challenges we face, we will always have this time together, this quiet moment at the end of the day. This is what I treasure most, Gideon. Just being with you. He kissed her temple, a gesture of tenderness and devotion. I promise, as long as I draw breath, you will have me and these moments. That is my vow to you, Rose. Today, tomorrow, and every day after. That is all I need. The years continued to pass, measured not in dramatic events, but in small accumulations of joy. Gabriel and Sarah had 3 children, all of whom learned to read at their grandfather's knee and learned to ride on horses their other grandfather provided. Ruth's family continued to grow in Montana, and they made the trips south every other year, filling the house with noise and love. The ranch prospered under Gideon's steady management, and Rose's sewing had become so renowned that women came from as far as Alamosa to commission pieces from her. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Gideon took Rose to Denver for a week. It was their first real trip away from Manassa, and they reveled in the novelty of it. They stayed in a hotel with electric lights and running hot water, ate in restaurants where other people cooked and served the food, and walked through streets crowded with automobiles and modern marvels. It is impressive, Rose said as they stood in front of the Brown Palace Hotel, watching the city bustle around them. But I miss home. So do I. Strange, is it not? We have all this luxury and excitement, and all I want is to sit on our porch in Manassa. That is because home is not a place. It is a feeling. It is us, together, wherever that might be. Gideon took her hand, and they walked back to their hotel in the gathering dusk. That night, lying in the unfamiliar luxury of a hotel bed, Gideon said, I have something for you. He produced a small box from his coat pocket. Rose opened it to find a delicate gold locket. Gideon, it is beautiful. Open it. Inside were 2 tiny photographs, one of Rose and one of Gideon, probably cut from the family portrait they had taken last year. So I can always be close to your heart, Gideon said. Literally. Rose began to cry, clutching the locket. 25 years, and you still find ways to surprise me. I hope I never stop surprising you. That is what keeps marriage interesting. They made love that night with the tenderness of long familiarity and the passion that had never dimmed. Afterward, Rose lay with her head on Gideon's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and thought about how lucky she was. Out of all the possible paths her life could have taken, she had found this one. Out of all the men in the world, she had found him. When they returned to Manassa, Gabriel and Sarah were waiting at the train station with their children. The grandchildren rushed forward, talking over each other in their excitement to tell about everything that had happened while Rose and Gideon were gone. Walking home through the familiar streets of town, surrounded by family, and heading toward the little white house with blue shutters, Rose felt a contentment so complete it was almost overwhelming. What are you thinking? Gideon asked, adjusting the youngest grandchild on his hip. That I am the luckiest woman alive. Funny. I was just thinking I am the luckiest man. That night, after everyone had left and they were alone again, Rose stood in her kitchen and looked around. This room had seen so much life, babies being fed, children doing homework at the table, holiday dinners with family crowding around until there was barely room to move. The house Thomas had gambled away and Gideon had returned to her had become the foundation for an entire family, a legacy of love that would continue long after they were gone. Come to bed, Gideon called from upstairs. Rose turned out the lights and climbed the stairs, each step as familiar as breathing. In their bedroom, Gideon was already in bed, reading by lamplight. He set aside his book when she entered and held out his hand. There she is, the woman who changed my life. You changed mine first, Rose said, settling beside him. Should we argue about who saved whom? We could, but I would rather just be grateful that we saved each other. Gideon pulled her close, and they lay in the darkness, listening to the familiar sounds of their house settling around them. Outside, Manassa slept under its blanket of stars. The mountains stood sentinel in the distance, ancient and unchanging, and in the little white house with blue shutters, Rose and Gideon Kane held each other and counted their blessings. They had started with nothing but a card game, a deed, and the courage to take a chance on each other. They had built a life from that fragile foundation, strong and true and lasting. They had loved each other through hardship and joy, through children and grandchildren, through all the ordinary days that added up to an extraordinary life. "I love you," Rose whispered into the darkness as she had done countless times before. "I love you too," Gideon replied, as he always had and always would. And in that moment, in that house, in that life they had built together, everything was exactly as it should be. The gamble had paid off, the odds had come through, and they had won the only prize that mattered, each other, and all the years of love that came with it. As Rose drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, safe and warm and cherished, she thought one last time about that terrible morning when Thomas had told her he had gambled away their home. She thought about the despair she had felt, the certainty that her life was over, and she smiled because she had been so wrong. Her life had not been ending, it had been beginning. Everything she had lost had been given back 100-fold, transformed into something better than she had ever imagined possible. The house was still hers. Her name was still on the deed. But more importantly, her heart belonged to a man who cherished it. Her life was full of love and family and purpose, and her future stretched bright before her. That was the real gift Gideon Kane had given her 25 years ago. Not just a house, but hope. Not just a deed, but a destiny. And they lived happily, contentedly, lovingly ever after in the little white house with blue shutters in Manassa, Colorado, where their love story began and would one day end, but never be forgotten. Their grandchildren would tell their own children about the cowboy who won a house in a card game and gave it to a woman he did not know, and how that act of kindness had sparked a love that lasted a lifetime. It would become family legend, proof that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places, and that true love, real love, the kind that lasts, is always worth the gamble.